Hello everyone, welcome to the Racist War. Welcome to episode 230. You're joined by Fenian and Nolsey. How are you, Nolsey? Been to any protests lately?
No, not yet. I'm going to protest against, cutlets being so expensive at the butcher.
Yeah, there's been some Tamil protests here.
Oh,
And
fuck.
like socialist alternative and that, I've been turning up to them. They are nowhere near as big as the ones in Melbourne and Sydney, though. And I don't think they've been like targeting the Home Affairs Office or anything like that.
Sold are just a cope post as an organisation.
Yeah. But,
I mean, to be fair, if we linked arms, we could probably crush Salt to death, just us two. They're like a bunch of toothpicks.
Well, they are, yeah.
Except for the fat,
Yeah, it's either end of the spectrum. Like, it's just like that, communism has the thin person, capitalism has the big fat person, but fascism is the ripped guy. They don't have that.
And just remember, I'm talking about an organization that I was a part of back in the day.
Oh, that's right. Because they're big on university campuses, aren't they?
Yes. They try to be. I was like, I'm a socialist, and then I actually care about the well-being, the financial well-being of my populace, blah blah blah, of whatever nation that I call home. And then they're like, I'm a socialist, and then in the idea that I want to stick 15 cucumbers up my ass, I'm just like, okay, we're not the same. So I became more nationalistic.
All right, yeah. So look, we are going to talk about the big protests that have been happening in Melbourne. We'll get to that soon. We thought we would start off today's episode regarding the questions about sexuality and gender in Census, which is not actually till 2026. It's like a year and a half away before you'll get the opportunity to fill that out and give the government all the vital data that they want. But they seem to be, if we're to believe what we've been told so far about this, that they didn't want to collect data on LGBT people in Australia. So I'm sure we're aware that since this became a hot topic, several Labor backbenchers basically said, no, we need these questions. So it was a very quick backflip. And Jim Chalmers and others have said, yes, don't worry. When we get census, we will definitely have questions related to sexuality and gender. But a lot of people are wondering just what were these questions? Now, I've got to say I was wrong here because I thought these questions, like, we're going to be asking about attitudes. What do you actually think about LGBT people? What do you think about gay marriage? What do you think about gay adoption? Although, what do you think about drag queen story? That kind of stuff. And I thought that simply because of the fact that Jim Chalmers referred to removing nastiness. And I thought, well, okay, they're afraid to see what people think, because they'll uncover all these homophobic pockets and groups of people who don't like gays. But no, I'm going to read through the three questions that have been leaked. I think they got to the ABC first. So these are the three questions that they decided to scrap. So here's number one. What is the person's gender? And then in brackets, gender refers to current gender which may be different to sex recorded at birth and may be different to gender recorded on legal documents. Respondents are asked to mark one of the following boxes: man, boy, woman, girl, non-binary, uses another term, prefer not to answer. So there you go. There's your first one.
I identify as the spirit of Hitler. The spirit of Hitler possesses me 24/7.
Okay, well you can tick the uses another term. That would be your selection. Now, I got to say I was surprised.
9/9F,
Well, look, like obviously I was wrong when I said that they weren't They were just afraid of gauging people's attitudes towards these issues. Instead, it looks like these questions are pretty banal, and they're just saying, like simply, how do you identify? So maybe they didn't want that question because there won't be as many transgender people as they think. Like we're sometimes told they make up like 1 or 2% of the population, even though it's something like 0.2%.
Yeah.
Maybe they're afraid to see how many children are identifying as transgender, because it'd be quite the opposite there. It would be record high numbers because of indoctrination in schools and media, deliberately aimed at children and trying to convert them. That's why you have the recent phenomenon of rapid onset gender dysphoria, a new mental
God,
illness.
how recent is that?
Yeah, which is basically just kids saying, "Oh yeah, like I'm transgender or whatever." They don't even
I
really
remember
know what it
covering that
is.
shit with you back in like 2022.
It was extremely triggering. Yeah, I mean the data came from Queensland. It was something like a 1,000%. I'm not exaggerating. Increase in under 18s identifying as transgender. Why was it only happening with youth? It was only that was the only part of the population where they saw this just enormous spike in that. So I don't know. What do you have an opinion here, Nolsey? Like why they may have been afraid of asking that question?
Again, like it's like Glad. It's like anytime that Glad puts out like any data or etc. Like they have to put the asterisk like, oh, like yeah, this is meant for this and this, and like oh, our data was actually selected and like preened, so like for this and this reasons, don't use it for any other reason. And then you actually look at the data and it's just like, oh wait, we can infer a whole bunch of shit from this, can't we?
Yeah, but I mean, what
Yeah.
what what inferences though do you think are they afraid of? That like maybe there isn't as many gay people or transgender people as what is often reported?
Well, you do have to realize that, like, again, my argument for against democracy is walking down the street and speaking to, your average person, or realizing that someone of average intelligence is smarter than 50% of the population. Um, Quite literally, it might be the case that, like, there is actually so little gaze and so much effort and etc. given onto them and representation in media that it might become distasteful to your average person.
Yeah, I mean, like when you actually look at the real numbers in terms of like adults who seriously identify as transgender, it's like 0.2%. It is really, really small. And when people are shown numbers like that, they think, well, okay, why do we talk about this so often? Why is there this huge push for transgender rights and recognition and or visibility is the one they always like to talk about. It's like, well, because you're barely visible. If you make up 0.2% of the population, it's like I don't know why you're demanding so much attention all the time. So yeah, I think they may well have been afraid of that. Okay, I'll go to question 2. How does the person describe their sexual orientation? The options are straight, gay or lesbian, bisexual, uses another term, which you can then specify, you can write your own in. Don't know, prefer not to answer. This is marked as a question for people aged 15 and over. Okay.
Oh,
Interesting. Yeah, because I would imagine basically the younger you go, the more likely they are to identify as LGBT, even though they're not LGBT. They just think they are because all these ideas have been put in their head.
I think that like I think I may have said this before on the show that like children are like pathologically designed to seek out whatever method means or etc. that gets them more attention, because if you're a child and you're getting more attention, it means you're going to
Yeah.
survive.
Oh, absolutely. And that's why, a lot of them would say, like,
That's why kids
that's
act out.
Yeah, but that reminds me of like the child drag queens, like Lactatia and Desmond is amazing. That is
Fucking yeah.
obviously, those kids get a lot of attention, a shitload of attention. So you can see why initially, at least, it would be appealing to them. They really have no idea what they're getting into. But yeah, they like
Yeah,
the
again,
attention.
children are fucking sponges.
Yeah. Okay, question 3. Has the person been told they were born with a variation of sex characteristics? Brackets, sometimes called intersex or differences of sex development. This question refers to innate reproductive development, genetics or hormones that do not fit the medical norms for female or male bodies. These specific characteristics may be noticed at birth or develop in puberty. The options are yes, no, don't know, prefer not to answer. Okay, so look, there's a bit of a mouthful there, but they're just talking about intersex people, which, for a lack of a better explanation, you could say they're like trapped between male and female. Like, this is where you do actually have like a genuine biological basis to their identity, their label as intersex.
Just physically, by the way, and even with the genetic freaks, like literally like 1 in several hundred million,
Yeah.
they only still act on 2 fucking chromosomes because the protein reader that actually deals at your DNA can only deal with 2 chromosomes at a time.
Right. I was going to say,
Yes.
because I did this.
Otherwise, you're a non-functional fetus at that point. Like you die in utero.
Yeah. So, look, the way I understand it, and I learned most of this from Soap Merchant, on Culture Bogans, we did this 3-part series called The Gender Trap. We discussed transgenderism and intersexuality and homosexuality. Like you said, in the womb, the actual, the genetic code that is set at the beginning is not trapped between male and female. It is either male or female. It's only that way.
Yes.
What actually happens is that during the development of the fetus, problems with hormones, etc., the fetus is not developed in, say, a fully male way or a fully female way. So, for example, there was a documentary we went through where they would actually kind of change the baby's gender at birth. So there was one baby that was born with basically like a very small penis and only internal testicles, not external. And so what they did was they just basically mutilated the child and put a cavity there to make it look like a vagina. And the reason given by the doctor was like, look, if we didn't do this, this child would be raised as a boy and ridiculed and have very low self-esteem because they had a small penis and no external testicles. Now, that to me is I just don't see that as a good enough reason. But also, that is what you would typically identify as an intersex person. But in that case, that was actually a male, and then they went ahead and attempted to raise that baby as a female. So there's still a lot of consequences to this kind of gender ideology, even within the realm of intersexuality. So,
well, again, as the Germans say, we're Essen was saying.
But look, when it comes to, well, I think you said it, intersexual people are even rarer than transgender people.
Yes, it's literally, you have to line up so many fucking keyholes to get that level of fuck up. Again, you're here, I'm here, the listeners here, because there is literally millions upon millions upon millions of safe checks in your DNA to make sure you don't fuck up.
Yeah. And, I got to say, I will say this is a demographic that I do feel genuinely sorry for. I don't know if you've ever seen them before, but they look pretty unusual. And that must be pretty damn difficult, like going through that. And what you have to remember is there is a genuine biological basis to what they are going through. When it comes to trannies saying, I am the opposite sex, it's just
I need to abandon my 6-year-old child.
Yeah, but I mean, they're screwed up in the head. It's not because they were born in the wrong body or something. And that's why, like, sometimes intersex people, they don't like being lumped into the LGBT plus category. Sometimes people just say LGBTI. They just tack them on to the end. And a lot of them are like, no, hold on. We don't want anything to do with you.
Well, again, there's like 3 modes of of why this is the case. It's because you've either become, like psychologically damaged by something, in a lot of instances that are readily available to the public. Fame is one of them, or your perverse sexual desires, which is another one, and that'll be Mr. Beast's friend. And the other one is just perverse desire, which to internet people or people on the internet, there'll be Christian, who openly admits that he had Christopher Chandler, not Christian Chandler, Christopher Chandler. He openly admits that he identifies as a woman to get into women's spaces to perv on them.
Is this the one who literally had sex with his mum?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh God. I confess that I did watch a bit of like Ethan Ralph tracking him down when he got arrested or whatever it was.
I need to go to fucking West Virginia for other reasons, but yeah, I'm not seeking out fucking Christian Chandler.
No. Okay.
Although, Mr. Bicycle Man, I'm gonna fucking run you over. Anyway.
So, look, we know that we're going to get questions. These questions, have been dumped, or at least the wording is going to be dumped. And my understanding is the way this works is the government instructs the Electoral Commission on, not the Electoral Commission, the Australian Bureau of Statistics, on what type of questions they want to ask, what kind of data, what kind of information they want collected, and then it's up to the ABS to find the right wording. And, they try to be as careful and precise with that wording as possible. So, it'll be interesting to see if we get questions beyond mere identity. Notice, like, everything I read out there was just like, basically, how do you identify? What's your gender? What's your orientation, etc. So, it'll be interesting to see if they do actually go that step further and ask for attitudes. What do you actually think of these people in these particular groups? That's what I would be much more interested in seeing. All right. We have one other piece of queer news, and unfortunately this is quite blackpilling. So Mark Latham has lost his defamation case in the federal court. This was brought about by the New South Wales State MP Alan Greenwich, who is Alex Greenwich, who is an openly gay man in the New South Wales lower house, I believe. And he has been awarded $140,000 in damages because Mark Latham was found to have defamed him. So, what was
he said exactly what he did?
Yeah, he did. Well, okay, so just to put it in context, if you don't know about this, Alex Greenwich referred to Mark Latham on Twitter, it was still Twitter back then, as a disgusting human being. Mark Latham replied and said, "Disgusting? ? How does that compare with sticking your dick up a bloke's ass and covering it in shit?" The ABC, of course, did not print that. You can find the screen caps, though, like on Google Images. As you said, that is basically a description of the kind of behavior that...
Have you stuck your dick up a bloke's ass and have you pulled out and be covered in shit? Unless you're fucking boy partners, which I imagine there are literally like scores in the fucking like, triple digits thereof. Is really good at animas.
Well, look, I don't know if this is what you're getting at, but are you saying like, the truth defense should have been used here?
Yes.
Because apparently it wasn't. So Latham's defenses here were of honest opinion and qualified privilege. I'm like, well, hold on. It's not like an opinion. Like he didn't really express a political. Yeah, he just described an act that Alex Greenwich was more than likely to have participated in. So yeah, I mean, the truth defense should have been issued there. Now, what I found interesting here, so the judge, David O'Callaghan, he found that the tweet was defamatory because it painted Mr. Greenwich as a person who, quote, engages in disgusting sexual activities. Okay, well, if you're saying that, aren't you basically saying that homosexual activities are disgusting? Because that is all Mark Latham described. So if that is the implication here, then surely we are to conclude that any form of like anal sex is a disgusting sexual act. And that would have been even more reason for Mark Latham to use the truth defense instead.
Could have won.
Because whether or not you think it's disgusting, it's true. He's a gay man. It's what he does.
Again, that's what we said on the show. Like, use the truth defense. Make him say he didn't stick his dick up the man's ass.
Too. It would have been absolutely epic courtroom drama if they had done that. I don't think media was welcome in the court, however. But yeah, it would have been great just to see like how would he actually respond to that. He might do a Stephen Fry. Like Stephen Fry says he only engages in oral sex. Another question of whether or not that is true. But yeah, that's what it was. So what are the details here? We got... all right, so there was $100,000 awarded for non-economic loss. So that means, like mental anguish or whatever. And a further $40,000 in aggravated damages. Now, Latham's lawyers argued that Mark Latham was attacked first, which he obviously was. He was called a disgusting human being. And that while the tweet was vulgar, shocking, and it was not defamatory. That's a weak defense. Because it's fine. Comments can be fine if they fine to cause damage. You can get away with actually causing someone, say, harm to their reputation or whatever, so long as those comments are true. And so that's why this was doomed to fail. I don't know if I'm totally qualified to be giving out legal advice of this kind, but that is certainly what it looks like.
You're the most qualified out of all of us in this situation.
Yeah.
In terms of statecraft, like Jesus fucking Christ, I you know what? I'm agreeing with Jordan Shanks. Our entire legal system is fucked, and we should repeal 18C. By the way, Jordan Shanks actually said we should repeal 18C.
Now, there was actually one part of Alex Greenwich's claim that was thrown out, and that was a second defamatory imputation that he was not a fit and proper person to be a member of the New South Wales Parliament because he engages in disgusting sexual activities.
Okay, well, there we have like fucking legal traction.
Yeah, well, let's talk about the legal precedent now that has set. Remember, this was the federal court, okay? So this is a federal decision. Well, here's what Alex Greenwich said. It sends a clear message that you can't attack a gay person based on their perceived sexual activities. that we are not going to accept a lowering in the tone of political discourse in this country, and that you can't just say whatever you like about someone without any consequence. So he's basically saying,
you are a fucking faggot. You take it up the arse. The lowering of the discourse only fucking amplifies the lowering of your entry hole when it comes to sex. You twink.
Knowlesy, he's saying that you're being defamatory right now and that you deserve consequences for that. He says if you can't attack a gay person because of their perceived sexual activities. So be careful. You might find yourself in the federal court saying that. But no, I mean, that is actually a serious...
I'll be in the federal court one day, but it'll be for different things. Anyway.
Yeah, but I mean, look, do remember if you're engaged in a bit of back and forth on Twitter or whatever, like we do have this federal precedent that has just been set in this case. It's
the most dangerous thug hunt.
Well, but we also know how litigious these groups can be. So yeah, not just politicians like Alex Greenwich. There's a hell of a lot of other people.
Oh yeah, no, like homosexuals, like drink a glass of wine in the evening, get bottomed, do some poppers, get bottomed again, like 15 times they're over, do a bit of meth, which is actually quite popular, get bottomed again, and then they're on Twitter and making notes.
Yeah, I recently watched this this documentary called Party Monster. I don't know if you've heard of Michael Alec, but he was the guy who killed the drug dealer and then disposed of his body. It was part of, they called it the Club Kids, which was basically a bunch of gay men and fag hags in New York City who kind of started the first sort of real clubbing scene with electronic music and all that. Absolutely fueled by drugs. And Michael Alec owed a lot of money to this drug dealer, and a fight broke out between the two of them and one other guy. The other guy hit him over the head with a hammer, and then Michael Alec suffocated him. Then they put the body in the bath, filled it with ice, and then it wasn't until the body started to smell a bit. They're we got to get rid of this. And
that's some low agency shit.
Yeah, but they dismembered the body and packed it into separate boxes and threw it into the Hudson River. And for a few months, Michael Alec was openly confessing it to people. You could say he was almost bragging about it. And but no one took it seriously. People weren't actually that concerned about it to go to police or whatever. I mean, he eventually did get caught, but for many months he didn't. But yeah, it's an interesting story if anyone wants to kind of get a glimpse into what the gay subculture is really like, And we're told, it's just like a normal heterosexual relationship, but just isn't true. Just, just scratch.
Oh, no. The biggest anti-gay person out there on the Australian scene is right now?
Who?
Jordan Shanks. King Grinder get worse.
I thought you might mention him, just because he just keeps getting mentioned as someone who might be drifting towards, views like ours.
Oh no, he's not. He's doing it by proxy. He's trying to do I think one of his writers or whatever, because he's an actor. He's not actually a political commentator himself. He doesn't have a political thought in his head. One of his writers is absolutely shitting the bed right now, and it's nominally left wing aligned, so he's going with it.
Oh, what do you mean?
He as a left wing commentator shitting the bed. He's getting way too close to the sun.
Oh, okay.
With his waxed, cheek tips, he's getting way too close to the sun.
Okay. Well, let's get on to that protest we talked about. So I think that in the second day of this convention or this expo It's called Land Forces 24 Expo. And this is where you've got hundreds of military and weapons producing companies descending into Melbourne to basically show off their products. So, yeah, you could definitely say that these are war profiteers. These people who, make their money off of conflict. Yeah, true. But, they basically supply those weapons to anyone who wants to buy them, though. They're capitalists at the end of the day. So, as was expected, there have been a lot of protesters turning out here. I believe that they're going to be there for every day of the expo. And the presence has been enormous, as has the police response. And typically, this is a lefty crowd of feral protesters, and they are implementing their usual feral tactics. So apparently they have been throwing some form of acid at police, and it's even been known to be contaminating some of their specialized uniform, like their military vests and those kind of things.
And the gay fucking cum streaks up the back of it don't fucking contaminate it.
Yeah, well, I mean, the cops are saying that they've basically got to throw out a lot of this equipment now. Like, it's just been ruined. And they've also been squirting an unknown or unidentified irritant up the nostrils of some police horses that, like, totally aggravates them and,
mare piss.
They can't kind of do the job they're meant to do.
Yeah, it's mare piss. That's what it is.
Is what?
Mare piss.
What's that?
A female horse, a mare.
Oh. Okay. And what? Squirting that up their nostrils is highly irritating.
No, it makes them want to fuck. Or it makes them distracted, I'll put it that way.
Oh, is it like what? So it's sort of like pheromones.
Yeah.
Oh, all right.
It's one of those things that are so bad that you'll get fucking like absolutely obliterated in court if you bring it like so much as so far away from a horse track. Also, horse cum you can't bring to a horse track either because most racing horses are mares.
Well, these may be tactics used by Tash Peterson or something.
I don't think she has that much of an understanding of how livestock works.
Oh, I know she doesn't. You can even watch debates with her. Like, she debates farmers and stuff. Talking about all that stuff. Yeah, you can tell she doesn't have a clue what she's talking about.
I still love that dairy belt dude fucking coming from where I come from, like absolutely tearing into it. Fucking bitch.
Yeah, and they've also been, at this protest, they've been putting up like these fake wanted for war crimes posters, like with Christopher Pyne's name on it, who was the former defense minister. But the thing about them is that they're actually somewhat serious because they're encouraging people to perform a citizen's arrest, which is technically legal. Don't know if it would be legal to perform a citizen's arrest for the reason of war crimes, though, or crimes against humanity, or whatever it is they're claiming. But yeah, they're going to gain precisely nothing from this. These companies are going to continue to sell and their weapons and make a profit. Really, we need to target governments when it comes to stopping these conflicts. Going after the weapons companies really is not going to do a bloody thing.
It's geopolitics. It's like, where the fuck are the weapons companies getting their fucking dollars from? It's states.
Right. Okay, so some other defense news. So we've just had Richard Marles, the current defense minister. He has stripped service medals from some ADF officers who were implicated in the alleged war crimes in Afghanistan, which, as we know, some of those allegations, we don't really, it's pretty hard to say if any of it was proved, but we know that some of the allegations were quite serious, like deliberately targeting, killing civilians. So, obviously you also had Ben Roberts-Smith implicated in all of that, and he ended up losing his defamation case in the end. So, arguably, you could say it's been tested in court. So, anyway, this was as a result of findings that were handed down by the Office of the Special Investigator, or the OSI, and it looks like there are actually fewer than 10 who have been stripped of those medals. So if it's true, it's it is obviously a very small minority of the ADF who have been implicated in this kind of behaviour. However, the inquiries are ongoing, so we could get more in the future. Now, another report that was handed down. This was from the Royal Commission into Defence and Veteran Suicide. So it made, I think it was a total of 22 recommendations. So they said that we need a new support body to help defence personnel transition from military life into civilian life. And if you staffed it with people who are experienced in the military service, it would help them apply for compensation and rehabilitation support, connect them with health services, and conduct ongoing monitoring of their well-being. Now, we've spoken a few times before about how veterans are not afforded any kind of special treatment when it comes to psychologists. They get like the same Medicare rebate that anyone else does. I think it's absolutely fair to say that anyone who has seen armed service before should get free psychological assistance if they want to see a psychologist, like within reason, but I would say pretty much be unlimited to them.
You're a socialist for fascist opinion. Oh God, I hate to see this day where I have to split with my co-host because he's saying basically what every single serious society has done for their war veterans, venerated war veterans. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, if you think what I'm saying there is too costly or outrageous or whatever, did you know that we gave, for example, our Vietnam veterans houses? I'm serious. If you just did a year or two of service in Vietnam, the government would actually buy you a house paid off completely. That's what we used to do for veterans. Now, we can't even pay for them to see a psychologist. So, this is one of the things, and this is actually probably the only thing that I like about Jackie Lambie. She was the one who really pushed for this Royal Commission, talking about that and talking about the mental health issues that veterans do deal with. Well, actually, I'll give the numbers. So, between 1985 and 2021, 2007 serving or former ADF personnel died by suicide, at an average of 3 per fortnight in the past decade. So that obviously means that in the past 10 years, for some reason, it's gone right up. So take from that what you will. Now, here's something I found very interesting. Suicide rates for male veterans is 24% higher than the general population, but for female war veterans, it is 102% higher than the general population. Isn't that interesting? That women, who we are told are just as capable and have the same mental fortitude and constitution as men when it comes to active service, are 102% more likely than the general population to commit suicide, compared to 24% for men. So that is, in other words, they're 4 times more likely than men to commit suicide. So when, we get called sexist for daring to say that, maybe the military, or at least active military service, is not the place for women, but the people who say it is, well, you are the ones actually contributing to what is an extremely high suicide rate amongst females. So who's the sexist one?
Still me.
Of course, it'll still be us at the end of the day. Simply recognizing differences. Okay. Recognizing that, no, men are actually better soldiers and they are better equipped to deal with things like trauma that is obviously inflicted when you see your friends killed and injured around you. And I mean, is anyone really surprised that affects a woman even more? That is more traumatic to a woman? It doesn't come as a surprise to me. And yes, it is one of the reasons why they should not serve.
No. Again, like also, women in the army, but for starters, women in the office is a travesty in itself. Women in the army is how you turn a defeat into a genocide.
Yeah, and just women in the police force as well, who, they actually have a lower standard of fitness, like when it comes to the testing they do to get into the academy and the testing they do in the academy is all assessed at a lower level than.
If you get pulled over by a female cop, I hope you're wearing a bulletproof vest. I hope you pray to your God.
I'm just like, I am stunned sometimes. Like I work in a city, so I see cops walk past a lot, and just some of the female officers, how short and thin and frail they look
in a self-defense situation. I'm defending myself against the unlawful actions of a police officer.
How could you handle yourself? How could you, like, in a violent confrontation with a criminal, how would you have a chance? You just wouldn't.
None. You're there. You're like the little fucking daisy they put on the table while the rest of the world is burning.
Yeah.
That's what you are.
Yeah. Oh wait. One last thing I wanted to say on veteran suicide is that the amount of soldiers who commit suicide compared to the amount that is killed on the battlefield is way, way higher, like much, much higher. So whenever you hear numbers given for, like, say, how many soldiers we had die in Afghanistan, which I think was like 45, something like that. What you should do is always basically times that by 2.5, because they're not telling you how many served in Afghanistan and later committed suicide. So the actual deaths, in these conflicts are much, much higher than what they tell you. All right. So let's move on to the economy. It seems like everyone wants to have a go at the Reserve Bank, although
as they should.
Yeah, I mean, look, the coalition and Sky News seem to be arguing that these criticisms are undermining the independence of the Reserve Bank. So one of the people who has taken aim is former Treasurer Wayne Swan. He said that its current monetary policy is akin to punching itself in the face. You said that they are putting economic dogma over rational decision-making. Basically what he was saying, in a nutshell, is all the recent interest rate rises too much. And I guess when he talks about ideology, he's saying that, the Reserve Bank has too much of a fixation on fighting inflation.
What?
And that's you find this is a common debate point when it comes to, say, people who are more libertarian in their economic views compared to those who are more Keynesian. Milton Friedman, for example, would always talk about how you needed to prioritize fighting inflation instead of fighting unemployment. Whereas the Keynesian says no, you need to achieve, you try as best you can to aim for full employment. So you could just as easily, therefore, say that it's Wayne Swan who's the one being ideological. Now, to maybe take Wayne Swan's side here a little bit, I remember when the first round of interest rate rises came about. So remember, we've had 13 consecutive rises. There's been a lot. And when they started, remember, they were actually at 0.1%, which is effectively zero. We basically had 0% interest rates. Then all of a sudden we had 13. And we not only that, but we started getting them during a time where Philip Lowe said we weren't going to get them. Remember, he's the former governor of the RBA. He actually said that it's if current circumstances continue, we should not expect a rise in interest rates anytime soon. I'm paraphrasing, but that's pretty much what he said. Now, that was, I think, incredibly irresponsible for him to say, because anyone who would listen to that would take away that he's just basically saying they probably won't rise. Anyone who read those comments would think that. And it just showed in the data, people were taking out mortgages under the expectation that, they would be paying effectively 0% interest, at least for a few years. And when the rate started to go up, Peter Costello came out, another former treasurer, and he attacked the RBA over that. Not really for the rises, but the fact that they had waited so long for those rises. And, he was right. We probably needed to be eased into it a bit better, if we had some... if we had interest rate rises earlier,
if we had multiple plan, etc.
Yeah.
But I was gonna say God, it's like telling people to ration their food. Who the fuck wants to be the person to actually put forward that policy, for better or for worse?
Yeah, but I mean, he suffered for that in the end, though. I mean, remember, he basically served out the rest of his term and then said that he wasn't seeking another term, because he had pissed so many people off with those comments. So, yes, you're right, but long term, it didn't work for him, did it? It really bit him on the arse.
Well, I hope he can retire and wipe his tears with all those, $5 bills he saved.
Yeah. But I mean, look, the Libs weren't attacking Peter Costello at the time. And, Sky News have just forgotten about that. They're just going right after Wayne Swan for these comments. Now, look, there are proposed reforms here from Jim Chalmers, the current treasurer. So here is what the federal government was proposing. It wanted to enhance, or supposedly this would enhance, the RBA's independence and create two boards: a governance board that would oversee the RBA's policies, and a monetary policy board which would set interest rates with a view to, quote, price stability and the maintenance of full employment in Australia. You see that ideological point of full employment coming in? So price stability as opposed to simply, pushing inflation down to, I think, 2.8% or something is their target. So the coalition had actually hinted that they were in agreement with Labor over these issues. Angus Taylor, the shadow treasurer, has since said no, that they see this as a stack and sack approach. What they mean by that is sacking people that they don't like and stacking them with people that they do. And again, they're talking about, well, let's just put ideologically aligned people into those boards that regulate the RBA. Now, Jim Chalmers and Angus Taylor have said to have had at least 3 meetings together. And Jim Chalmers has said that there has been multiple assurances to Angus Taylor that there will not be this kind of stacking and sacking that he's accusing them of. And a number of other concerns as well have been apparently discussed. So it looks like those proposed reforms are on ice for the time being anyway.
So no repeat of 09? Was it 09? In 2010.
Where what happened?
Kevin Rudd getting cleared house.
Rudd, was kicked out in 2010.
Yeah, 10 area.
Yeah, I mean, look, here we're talking about the RBA though, not politicians. Yeah. So it is a bit different. But look, I also just think that maybe at the moment, like, there hasn't been an interest rate rise in a while, and I don't think there's going to be before the next election because inflation is under 4% now. It doesn't mean we're going to get a cut either, of course. They're just going to sort of remain stable. So this isn't exactly a pressing issue right now anyway, I don't think. But we'll see if Jim Chalmers does push ahead with those planned reforms anymore. Okay. Finally, on the economy, Bridget McKenzie from the Nationals. This was referred to simply as a thought bubble, meaning this is definitely not official policy from the Nationals or from the coalition, about using divestiture powers to break up the airline industry. Now, of course, this is in reference to the recent collapse of Rex Airlines, which was, pretty much the only other domestic competitor Australia had up against Qantas and Virgin. I think they've still got like a handful of regional flights that are going, but flights between like capital cities, they're all gone.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, the Nationals have already basically, I think it is official national party policy now for divestiture powers when it comes to Coles and Woolworths. Supermarkets. They want to be able to pass like anti-competitive laws and punish, Coles and Woolies, the duopoly, and try to introduce other competitors into it. Well, they want to do the same thing when it comes to the airlines. And I mean, we must have an issue here. I mean, because Rex is not the first airline to be pushed out by Qantas and Virgin. There's a continuing pattern here. So, yeah. But the Liberals are the ones who really hate this stuff, though. They obviously take a lot of money from the business lobby. The Nationals take a lot, but they take it from different types of businesses. They take it from big agra, really. So I don't mind these ideas that the Nationals come up with. The Nationals do often propose, like big stick, big government ways of fixing problems that you could say run counter to the ideological bent of their senior Liberal partners. But in the end, they always lose. They're always just told to shut up about this. And it looks like this is the case right here. Bridget McKenzie comes out and mentions it once just as a possibility, and she's just told back in the box lately.
Yeah, it's because this actually is necessary, and this will not cause like further chaos in our own governments. Willing or not willing is just like, yeah, let's fuck this entire situation up as much as need be.
Right.
Okay. Is the cat going?
No. I was just taking my jumper off. I'm like so passionate about what I'm saying. My body temperature is rising.
We're getting heated in here. He's about to drop the N-word.
All right. Not so long as we're on YouTube, we won't be doing that. And geez, Nolsey, you've already dropped it once today. The other F word. Somehow we're still on YouTube though. Okay, let's move on.
We'll be there until we get like a big guest, and then we'll be suddenly gone.
Let's talk about housing.
All right.
So, I think in WA we may be a little unique in doing this. But when it comes to our social housing, we tend not to just build like a big block of apartments and then designate all of those flats social housing and therefore put all those people together. As anyone should know, doing that can cause enormous disturbances and crime because, you're putting
the projects.
You're putting a bunch of unemployed people who are often, involved in drugs and maybe even gang activity, that kind of stuff. You're putting them all together into the same location. It is a recipe for disaster. What's that one? Redfern, for example, in New South Wales. Classic example of that. So in WA, what we try to do is we don't build those apartment complexes. We actually put them in houses. And not only that, but we spread them out. We put them in poor areas and we put them in rich areas. So there was this building group, WeLink Group. They approved a 9-story, 50-unit complex with a retail on the ground floor. And this was going to be built in Subiaco's main entertainment and commercial precinct. Subiaco, by the way, one of our most expensive suburbs. Now, this was all done under the agreement with the WA government on condition that 6 of those 50 units be set aside for affordable housing, social housing, in other words, right? And so this is, part of that plan. We're actually going to mix in these poor people in a rich suburb, Subiaco. Well,
good. I'm all for torture.
Yeah. So, those units would either be sold to the government for social housing or independent social housing. Now, the developer, however, has just applied to the local council to amend that planning approval and delete that requirement. Now, we're not really sure why here, but I can definitely hazard a guess. And that is there would have been a number of people who, bought the apartment off the plan. Apartments typically are just sort of bought off the plan, or at least a lot more than houses are because they're all the same. And you got a lot of people saying, whoa, hold on a minute. You mean I'm going to be in an apartment complex where there's like 6 fucked up, drugged up families there? I don't like the sound of that. And this is not the first time I've read a story like this. You want to get like yuppies stirred up on an issue that isn't climate change? Well, this is one, if you put like vagrants among them.
If you made the consequences material, yes.
Yeah, which is why, I basically do support stuff like this. And I support, I don't like the fact that this is an apartment complex. I like it just when they're houses. But still, I would rather they put that in Subi rather than just make like a big, massive one where the whole thing is social housing and putting that off in Gosnells or something, God knows they've got.
It would be funny though.
Yeah.
Imagine a whole bunch. Imagine the projects out in Gosnells. That'd be season fucking 19 of Underbelly right there.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Now, here's one that really pissed me off. So, regarding the housing crisis in New South Wales, it has been a report has been handed down to the Premier from the New South Wales Productivity Commission in terms of the type of housing that should be built, and that would ease the strain of shortages. And here's what it proposed. Higher density zones around trade stations would be double in size and extend further into Sydney's eastern suburbs and North Shore. And design standards would be relaxed. Here's the triggering part, to allow the construction of smaller apartments without access to parking, storage, or direct sunlight.
What the fuck?
So you will live in a pod with no car park that is really, really small, has very, very little access to any other services, and would not even have sunlight in it.
You know, Finian, you know that Mama runs peach trees?
The what?
The mega city, the mega block, and was that Mega City 05 from Judge Dredd? Mama runs peach trees.
Oh, and I watched that movie in so long.
Watch it again. It's a good one.
I should. Honestly, I think I was a teenager when I saw that last. But no, it just, fuck's sake. Again, this is where we refuse to acknowledge that it is immigration, and almost exclusively immigration, that is causing this shortage and high rent prices, high house prices. But no, they say build them taller, build more of them, make them smaller, cut them off from car parks, even cut them off from natural light. That's how you solve it.
We are in such a living circumstance that people at the ass end of the Industrial Revolution, like, you know, literally like having a family of 5 in a hovel, would not be jealous of our future.
No. Yeah, I mean, like, how the fuck do you raise a family in one of those? Even if the family is just one child. Like, how the fuck could you do that?
It's called your genetic dead end. Again, I say this a lot, but I thank fucking 23andMe for telling everyone that you're all descended from country bumpkins.
All right. So last story on housing. So we've got a report from New Australian Housing and Urban Institute. This found that 70% of Australian households have reported building quality problems. Now, to be completely fair here, that does not necessarily mean like structural problems with the house. It can also include being energy inefficient. So if it's a house that, say, burns off too much gas or whatever it is, or lacks a solar panel or whatever, it can be put into that category, right? So yeah, when I first saw this, I thought, oh wow, that's like a massive amount, 70%. I was like, oh wait, hold on. They mean the house isn't green energy friendly enough. In many cases, anyway. Now, that said, I would still imagine that there would be a hell of a lot of quality issues for a number of reasons. One, because we're getting brown people to build our houses now, and we're getting Indian engineers who used to be Uber drivers actually working as the structural engineers. But also we're getting a lot of building companies that are going belly up, you know, they're about to go bankrupt or whatever, and then they just start cutting corners. We know this because a lot of the people who have like a house that is left half finished, when they then find a builder to come in and finish the job, that builder says to them, you know that there's actually a lot wrong with this house. Like, it doesn't need to just be finished. It needs to have all of these structural issues rectified.
It needs to be unfucked.
Yeah. Because the last builder, who was running out of money, cut all these corners. That is a huge problem as well. So expect to see more of it. All right, let's move on to industrial relations. So we've all seen that footage of John Setka, who turned up on the Footscray Hospital and the Metro Tunnel construction sites recently. They still don't really know how he got on there. Those two projects, I understand, are basically closed shop union jobs, meaning you have to be a member of the CFMEU. It is technically illegal, but the CFMEU still do a good job of running a closed shop. But Victoria Police have said that they're not filing any criminal charges against John Setka, even though, I don't know, I mean, isn't that at the very least trespass? Yeah, no permission to be on what was private property? I don't know.
We'll see.
Yeah, we will. But yeah, I mean, that means we haven't seen the last of John Setka, even if he is not the head of the Victorian branch anymore. But he's escaped that for now. Okay, now the Minerals Council, they're very upset with the federal government for the recent raft of changes that have gone through. And these are things like equal pay for equal work. That is, when people are hired through labour hire and they're paid less than people who are employed directly through the company. There's other stuff too, like the right to disconnect. The Minerals Council believe that this is, I'll read it here. They said it's reckless. So Albanese did an address at a high-profile parliamentary dinner, and the Minerals Council Chief Executive Tanya Constable was there. And she gave a warning that those industrial relations changes are already bringing conflict to every workplace in every industry.
Cool. It sounds like the Minerals Council has the same fucking disposition as a person passing a whole bunch of rocks and minerals through their urethra in the form of fucking kidney stone.
Well, look, to be fair, there's what the other point that she made I do agree with, and that is about the net zero by 2050 policy. She said the ability to benefit from the net zero transition would fail if they embraced conflict over cooperation. That is, give in to the demands of the unions. So reckless federal government industrial relations reforms, state royalty raids, onerous looming environmental rules, and high energy costs threaten to derail the nation's prosperity and erode existing copper, gold, uranium, coal, and iron ore operations. Yeah, that's what you said at the conference. Look, I don't deny that a bit of their bottom line would be affected by some of these IR changes. It'll be way more affected, though, by net zero policies. And dare I say that, she's a woman representing those in the Minerals Council who simply haven't invested in green energy. They weren't as forward-thinking as Twiggy Forrest, who got onto this stuff much earlier. He knew where all of this was going, and he makes a lot of money out of it. Not everyone did, though.
Next time I see him, I should eat his face off.
Okay, so last IR story. We just had a strike by nurses and midwives in New South Wales. So they went off the job 7 a.m., I think it was Thursday, I'm not sure. And it was a 12.5 hour long strike. So it was, pretty significant. It did cause extensive delays at hospitals and delayed elective surgery. They're not so cruel as to, shut down like emergency or anything like that. But it still, caused a bit of an upset. So anyway, this is about they want a 15% pay rise. So, they want it on par with what aged care workers got. Now, they're currently being offered a 10.5% pay rise. Now, yes, that is above the current level of inflation. But also remember, how low have nurses and midwives pay rises been in recent years? They've been really, really low.
Especially midwives.
Yeah, we're talking 2 to 3% here, and that was including back where we had 7-8% inflation. So they went for years with their wages not moving in line with the cost of living. So it makes sense that they would want to have a pay rise in line with aged care workers. Now, Chris Minns has said that if they were to implement a 15% rise, that would cost the New South Wales government $6.5 billion. And that is apparently how much they spend on the entire police force. So, I don't know. I haven't crunched the numbers there, so I can't tell you if that is accurate from Chris Minns. But one thing is clear, though, and that is that the union is not giving up here. So they're not accepting the current offer, meaning only that we can expect more action like this. Oh, and I forgot to say, the Industrial Relations Commission actually deemed this action to be illegal and told them not to go on strike. So not only that, we might actually see charges being laid here for illegal industrial action.
Good.
Okay. On to climate and energy. Now, regarding the Blaney gold mine that we're hearing a lot about, so this was one expected to generate around $1 billion in revenue, including $200 million in royalties given to the state. Tanya Plibersek made a Section 10 ruling here under Aboriginal cultural and heritage laws, saying that, well, look, oh God, what is it? The Tailings River. I'm sure you can explain this stuff better than me, Nolsey, but they said, look, basically you can't go in this particular river. You've got to find another way to do it. Now, this decision that she made, that Tanya Plibersek, the Environment Minister, made, apparently was largely influenced by the advice of a historian who is a director in one of these Aboriginal corporations. And I stress that the Aboriginal corporation that was even bigger actually said that they had no problems with this gold mine. In fact, they're very disappointed by what's going on right now because that Aboriginal corporation was going to get GIBs. They were going to get money. So it's not just the state. It's not just government that gets royalties for these. It's these Aboriginal groups as well. Anyway, this particular Aboriginal corporation, one of the directors is Lisa Patton, who is a historian. And if you have a look at a picture of her, there is not a drop of Aboriginal in this woman. She looks just like a very, very typical Anglo. And
so you're going with sewage in the wine, not wine in the sewage.
It's been revealed by The Australian that in 2021, she attempted to have the New South Wales Office of Environment and Heritage register all waterways in and around Blaney as Aboriginal sites. So this included every river, creek, lake, and even swamp in that area. She claims it to be a sacred Aboriginal site. All right? Even the fucking swamps. So this, this is the corporation whose advice was taken seriously. And they want to tell you that it's even bloody rivers, creeks, swamps. All of this stuff apparently has Aboriginal cultural significance. I'd love to ask, just an average Aborigine in the site, if they know any of these apparent Dreamtime stories that are connected with these lakes, with these swamps. They never know any of that stuff.
But again, the only dream time they know about is, the last time they passed right the fuck out.
That's right.
I mean,
okay, now talking about this environmental COP that the federal government wants to roll out, Environmental Protection Agency. Now, this has stalled again. So, again, this might be something that is not taken to the next election. We'll wait and see. But the reason why it stalls is because the government, we basically know now, is trying to either get a deal with the Greens or the coalition, one of the two. So that means that the changes or the compromises that they make for this EPA really could swing, to the left or to the right here. Now, last week, I assume we covered this, Albanese suggested that they were willing to weaken, we did cover this, powers of the EPA. So what they were using to try and convince the coalition to get on board with this was to say, okay, look, this may be like a new regulator, but we won't issue more regulation. This will simply be like another body tasked with only enforcing existing laws that are already on the books. Now, Tanya Plibersek, however, also said at a recent press conference, this was the Minerals Council of Australia CEO Tanya Constable, who I talked about before. Plibersek was addressing an audience of mining executives, and she was asked about what the EPA might look like, including climate considerations. Now, what does that mean? Do you remember this thing called the climate trigger? You remember the climate trigger? This would be granting the EPA the power to approve and disapprove projects. So like new mine sites, whatever. And the climate trigger is based on, well, do we deem this project to be environmentally sound? For example, will it emit too much carbon? If they say that it is going to emit too much carbon, the EPA would have unilateral power just to say no and just put it off completely. Now, it has been...
Through what authority?
Their own. that authority would be bestowed upon them. That's the Greens' policy, by the way. Okay,
Jesus fucking Christ.
The Greens wanted to go. Now, thankfully, Labor are not willing to go that far. However, they've been willing to water it down from a climate trigger to a climate consideration, meaning that Labor has agreed to remove climate considerations and assessments for new projects on the EPA component of the three tranches of bills under Nature Positive, with the coalition moving closer to supporting through a series of amendments which restricted newly established EPA to compliance and governance capacities. Okay, so the Greens originally demanded a climate trigger, which would put assessments back in the frame. But they're willing to water down those requirements to a climate consideration, meaning that they wouldn't have unilateral power to just say no to it. However, they would be able to lobby the government and make recommendations via these climate considerations. So in other words, it would be much, much harder to actually get an approval. Even if the EPA didn't have the unilateral power just to say no completely, they could still make it much, much more difficult. So
I don't think like one layer of bureaucracy is one layer of bureaucracy. One layer of bureaucracy is like more like 15 to, well, depending how big the system is. And as we're talking federally here, it's quite large.
yeah. So I mean, yeah, this is actually one of those examples where I say, man, I really don't want like a hung parliament where the Greens are in alliance with Labor, because this is the kind of shit that they would demand, you know. And it is like that one thing that makes me say, oh, maybe a coalition government is preferable, because there at least are some differences in terms of energy policy. And, Peter Dutton has differentiated the coalition much, much more than, say, Turnbull and Scott Morrison did, through his support of nuclear power and not having a emissions reduction target for 2035, stuff like that. So all I can say is I do hope that if this EPA is going to be brought into being, I really hope that it is done so with the support of the coalition rather than the Greens, meaning that it's a compliance only regulator. Okay, well, let's talk a bit about electric vehicles. So the energy regulator announced a new energy and supply demand projection for the next decade. So that means how much electricity are we going to produce and how much are we going to consume? Now, in December last year, AEMO predicted that 7 million electric vehicles would be sold over the following 10 years. However, they have just revised that figure to only 4 million. That's almost half. Now, we've spoken about this before, where in the past couple of years, there has been this huge spike in the purchasing of Teslas and other electric vehicles. However, it's really waned since then, because all the virtue signalers who wanted to get an electric vehicle, most of them have them by now, or at least a big chunk have their Tesla with their personalized number plate. And
you know what? Go get a Tesla. Actually, I endorse getting a Tesla because every single Tesla is 5 dead Congolese children.
Because of the lithium mining.
Cobalt, actually.
Oh, cobalt. Okay.
Yes.
So
kill them. Make them die in the mines.
These original projections that AEMO had made were based on earlier figures, earlier trends of Australians buying electric vehicles, and that's waned. Now, I even found the top 10 selling vehicles for 2023. Number 1, Ford Ranger. Number 2, Toyota Hilux. Number 3, Isuzu Ute D-Max. Number 4, Toyota RAV4. Number 5, the MG ZS. Number 6, Tesla Model Y.
Oof.
Number 7, Toyota Land Cruiser. Number 8, Mitsubishi Outlander. Number 9, Mazda CX-5. Number 10, Hyundai Tucson. Now, I'm not a cars guy, but I can only see one electric vehicle in there. The Tesla
there is,
Y.
yeah.
That's it, isn't it? That's the only EV in there. So,
I mean, I'll put it this way, in terms of WA, there's 2 Tesla fucking sales houses in the same fucking postcode in Osborne Park. There's one on the other side of the freeway, and there's one in Osborne Park proper. They're normally empty, but it's honestly it's a status symbol at this point. It's not actually a decision made by people, and we're not fucking being Luddites and etc. You're talking about a car that has a fixed lifespan of 5 years.
Yeah, I have no issue in principle with an electric vehicle. I really don't care. I just want a car.
I'm a mechanical engineer. I'm fucking restarting to be a mechatronic engineer. I love things that move and use electricity. That'll make me a huge fan of the fucking electric car, right? No, it doesn't. because I know the fucking properties of an electric car. In fact, the fact that Elon Musk, the fucking owner of the fucking corporation that makes them, had to include the cradle and the grave, exclude the cradle and grave of his car analysis when it came to comparing it to an internal combustion engine, it was disgraceful. And I talked about this, I believe, when I was a guest on this show back in the day, 4 years ago.
Yeah. So Ampol, one of the country's largest petrol suppliers, cancelled plans to triple the number of electric vehicle charging stations this year. So you see how all of these figures have been wrong, like, predicting this huge surge and uptake of electric vehicles. This was actually a pretty short-term thing by the virtue signalers. And so I guess now we do actually have a little bit more time for that adjustment process. We talked about how, other areas of the market have not adjusted, such as producing electric vehicle mechanics. We simply just don't have enough people trained in how to service these vehicles. So this might actually give us a bit of breathing room now that, not as many people are buying all of these things. And these companies are actually making the decisions not to roll out so many charging stations and other things associated with electric vehicles. However, the government is not going to like this. I mean, I don't know if we have a federal target, but I'm pretty sure there are state targets in terms of, like in Queensland, I'm pretty sure, don't they have a target, like they want 100% electric vehicles by some date? I'm pretty sure I remember reading that. So what black pills me a little bit when I read this stuff is, what's the government response going to be? Because they're going to say, oh no, we don't like this. Like, too many people are buying these big gas-guzzling four-wheel drives. Not enough people are buying electric vehicles. Does that mean we need even tougher fuel efficiency standards? In other words, financial penalties for car manufacturers who don't produce fuel-efficient cars?
I like being really enthusiastic with people who have electric cars and be like, yeah, fuck yeah, man, we're both on the same page. T&D, total nigger death. You've killed 5 Congolese children. Yeah, man, we're doing it. We're cleansing the world of this filth.
You can say TDN, but don't actually spell out the acronym like that, if we want to stay on YouTube.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh God. So here in WA, when it comes to filing a dispute against some kind of environmental project or whatever, you've got to pay a fee for that, as is usually the case. You want to file anything with the government, like this, you've got to pay. So from Monday, the WA government will charge $430 for lodging mineral title objections before the state's mining wardens.
Oh God, the warden court. So
there will be discounted fees for concession and pension card holders who will only pay $100.
Now, again, it doesn't matter the amount.
Well, the amount WA renters are furious over this because they say that is way too much money that is going to deter people from, filing complaints. That really is not much money.
No, it's not. Again, it's not the entry money to file the complaint. It's actually competing with it, because you if you actually put that money down, you're fighting with a mining company at that point.
Yeah.
You think $430 is like worth the mining company's fucking half of a fucking second? Well, then be my fool.
Yeah, I mean, if you actually want to take them on, you obviously need a hell of a lot more than that. But I mean, remember these green groups do actually have that money.
Yeah,
They love their
it's
politics.
not green groups that's the issue here. Actually, it's actual farmers. Farmers are realizing that yeah, they actually can be taking the warden code for land that they actually own themselves.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, like when
Um,
they just make like one change to that land.
yep. And
Yeah.
now it's open, and now it's for fucking full view of the court, and also they can reassign it. So, like, say, like, you're part of a dairy farm has transition metals on it. Your congratulations, you're fucked.
Oh no.
Yep. We're looking at a
Okay.
full-on Pandora type situation with that warden court. That warden court was made, I believe, in the just after Federation. It needs to be gotten rid of. To be honest, farmers should own their own land. In fact, the warden court is literally the reason why you got big agra in WA from to begin with.
Oh, okay. I got to
Yep.
admit, I'm not all that familiar with it.
You've hit the one fucking topic that I know about.
Okay, well, let's get on to the next one. This is about Australia is in a bid to co host a global climate summit. And we're
Cool.
told that this could deliver a direct $100 to $200 million economic boost to whatever the host city may be. So, this is according to data from the federal government. So, the government is competing against Turkey, and of course the ABC spell it in like the Turkey in the
Okay.
Turkish, yeah, Turkey. So this is for the right to host the COP31 United Nations Climate Change Conference. Now, this is the conference where we're told that where all the big policy decisions are made. Now, we haven't even had COP29 yet, so this one will be a while off. So yeah, we're hoping to do COP 31. Um, so the cities that are keen here are Brisbane, Sydney, and Adelaide, and that would see around 300,000 people from around the world attend the conference, and all the other events that surround it. So it's a big wank fest where we make further policy on how to raise people's power prices.
And to be honest, we should say like a big gay fest right here. Go jack off the dude next to you and make yourself feel good.
Okay, now here's some good news for the greenies. Apparently, Australia's methane emissions have decreased over the past 2 decades. So, this is according to a report from a leading global carbon research group. So, the world's methane emissions have grown by around 20%. But Australia, or Australasia as they put it in this report, and Europe emitted lower levels of the gas. Okay. This is literally the fart gas, isn't it? So apparently we're emitting less of it.
Oh god, like when we domesticated this animal that like exists on the planet, it also exists in larger numbers, concentrated them and put them up and etc. Oh god, we as like these small little apes actually destabilize this entire gigantic fucking cosmologically large planet.
Right.
Oh god, we did that, didn't we?
Look, we are signatories to the Global Methane Pledge. Worth pointing out that this is non-binding. You'll simply, you just make it a goal for yourself. And the goal here is to cut methane emissions by 30% by 2030. And apparently, if we keep going the way we are going to get there. Get to a 30% reduction.
Cool. You're gonna see like a level of like travesty that makes Cully look like a fucking like a dream.
Yeah.
But yeah, cool. All right. Trust me, I'm one of the more well-spoken and nicer people from the Dairy Belt. The rest of the people from the Dairy Belt will skin you and eat you alive.
Okay, so Zali Steggall, one of the Teal MPs, she has, well, basically led the Teals. This is like official Teal policy now, the fake independents. They're looking for a 75% emissions reduction by 2035.
Jesus.
Now, they're saying that if you want to reach net zero by 2050, this is the most realistic interim target you would need for 2035. Now, as it stands right now, Labor do not have a 2035 target. However, they said that they will have one before the next election. The coalition, on the other hand, says they won't, even though they're still committed to a net zero by 2050 target. But you know what? Like, Zali Steggall, I think, is actually, she's basically correct here. That, like, if you do want to meet what is an extremely ambitious target by 2050, well, you do have to have short-term interim targets to get there. And yeah, they may well need to be as whopping as that. But to me, that simply says, okay, well, doesn't that mean net zero by 2050 is a bad idea? Okay. If you need to take actions this drastic, then it sounds like the whole net zero by 2050 thing is not such a good idea to start with. So, that's why I wish Dutton would just go that step further. Okay, great, you said no interim target, but what about just abolishing that long-term target altogether? And it would be politically popular. I mean, ever since you took the gamble and supported nuclear, and by the way, it was like revealed lately that the Nationals had been pushing for nuclear power behind the scenes under the Scott Morrison government. So Scott Morrison was not willing to take that gamble. Peter Dutton was, and the polling suggests that it has paid off for him. Why doesn't he take that extra risk and say no net zero by 2050?
I love every single geopolitical analyst saying like, oh yeah, this is this and this and this and this, blah blah blah, and then they break it down and fucking like into like conundra and fucking like conspiracy when it comes to Australia. Because why the fuck do we follow America? Why the fuck do we follow everyone? We are the equivalent of the dude who made his base right in the corner of every RTS. Why are we following geopolitics? Why do we care about geopolitics? We could just be over here doing our own thing.
We definitely could.
Again,
I mean,
that was the entire point of this country, wasn't it?
Well, when it just comes to like natural resources, like Australia has the ability to pretty much be an autarky.
Dude, we have the ability to make all of our fucking neighbors happy when it comes to like food exports, mineral exports, material exports, and etc. And nothing matters before the but. I guess we're tied to some weird fucking geopolitical nightmare. Well, there we go. That's the reason.
Okay. Well, let's move on from climate and energy. Just a quick story on foreign students. So the Universities Australia chair, David Lloyd, will accuse the government of treating international students as cannon fodder in a political debate over migration.
That more than 250,000 of the standing population of this country of 26 million. So I wouldn't say cannon fodder at that point.
No. I mean, look, as we've said, all right, round about a 25% decrease in the amount of foreign students that we'll take in for 2025. All right, that's one visa class. The government has basically, we are getting reductions in none of the other classes. None. So it's still a very small effect. So we have data from the Department of Education that shows 15 universities will have their international student commencements slashed, as the ABC puts it, from semester one of next year. Great, I don't care. Something they left out here, though, is that a number of regional universities or regional campuses will actually see their numbers increase. Because, we have this strange fascination in Australia where, like, somehow immigration is better if we push them away from the cities and into the bush. That makes, Alan Jones, for example, will tell you that's immigration done properly. Send all the Jeeps to Whoop Whoop instead. So, yeah, that is part of the government's plan here as well, is to send them to the regional campuses. And when it comes to
regional means WA, by the way, just to reiterate, regional means WA.
Yeah, it means South Australia as well. Regional, in most visa
actually
cases,
means Tasmania as well.
No. It basically means anywhere outside of Sydney, Melbourne, and Brisbane.
Yep.
Seriously, that's what it means. Like outside of the metro areas of those three cities, like anywhere else for the sake of migration conditions or visa conditions is a regional area.
I believe that I actually talked about this when I was a guest on the show, that I was actually given a memo saying like, oh, this is things you can't bring up or things you can't make an issue because of our changing demographic in the university. Me as a teaching fellow had to learn how to not piss off or start like interracial conflict. That was fucking weird. I was learning about stress and materials and blah blah blah. It's like, also here's how not to piss off the Han Chinese.
Mm-hmm.
Oh all man, right. I love that we're in this position. It's a good position to be in.
All right, well, let's get on to some Aboriginal news. Now, I'm getting this story from the Australian newspaper, and they are very pleased to report on the inaugural First Nations Arts Board. So, I'd never heard of this woman, but Rachel Mazza, she was a film and stage director. So her and Arts Centre's peak body boss, Philip Watkins, they're going to chair this First Nations Arts Board. So the government just announced that. This board will support the increase in career pathways for Indigenous cultural practitioners. So Rachel Mazza is currently artistic director of Indigenous stage company. Oh God, I'm not going to read that. Something Theatre Company. And Philip Watkins is a chief executive of Aboriginal art advocacy group Desert. I think that's what that actually says. Were named yesterday as coaches. So the board was promised by the government's revised cultural policy and was made possible by legislation passed earlier this year establishing a First Nations arts as part of Creative Australia, the government's cultural funding arm. Now, how much money are they going to get? They're going to get over a 4-year period, $52 million. So they're pouring that into the dissemination of First Nations arts and culture.
Well, at least they put an asterisk on it, like they do in the WA Museum, saying it's all post-colonial, right? They'll do that?
Yeah.
Oh, wait, they probably won't.
Okay, now, some other Aboriginal news. I can't remember if we covered this at the time, but there was a story back in March coming from Broome in the northwest. There was this bloke, Matej Radalik, so he's obviously some kind of Slav living in Broome. He cable-tied the hands of 3 Aboriginal children together.
Based.
And and there's photographs of it. You can see it. Now, he didn't do this for no reason. He actually owned a number of properties that sort of surround his own. And these Aboriginal kids had been breaking in and doing things like swimming in the pools, and also using like nearby like bricks and stuff that were being used in construction, picking them up and smashing the windows. That's just a couple of examples. Basically, they were playing silly buggers at all of these different properties that this guy owned, and they had caused tens of thousands of dollars worth of damage.
Yeah, I think we talked about this, but also those Aboriginal kids are lucky that they weren't one of the other Balkan ethnicities that this dude hated, because they wouldn't have just been handcuffed together; they would have been skinned alive. Dear God, if he was a Serbian and you're a Macedonian or a Croatian.
Well, I don't know. This guy's a Slav, though, so
Serb.
I don't know. Okay, well, he, considering that, he probably restrained himself pretty well. But look, of course, when this story first broke, the photo, of course, was just front and center, and cable ties Aboriginal children together, and they just completely left out of context, all of the other stuff that was happening. This guy basically had enough. He caught them swimming in one of the pools that he owned again. So on this occasion, he went over and he tied all of them together by the wrists with cable ties. But he then immediately called the police and reported it. It's not like he
was
did
actually he was being nice. Like
pleasure.
I've heard like fucking tales from the veterans of the 1995, like the troubles in the Balkans. I heard tales from the dude who literally choked someone out by their own like molly cord, and did a fucking a fucking tourniquet on themselves using basically a stick from the branch that was of the tree next to them and their own belt.
Yeah, so
these Aboriginal kids got off light.
Yeah, I mean, look, if this guy did a full-on Slav chimp out, it would have been a hell of a lot worse. Now, see, another thing that was reported at the time was that, it took 37 minutes for the cops to arrive. So therefore, it's they're saying that, he held them in captivity for this extended amount of time. But he was actually just waiting for the cops, Now, the reason why this story is back in the news is because this is actually in court at the moment, and we get a decision in October. I'm not sure. I'm sorry, I don't know exactly what the charges were, but they actually cross-examined the police officer who ended up charging or arresting this man, this Slav. And he actually testified under oath in the court that he actually believed that this man had committed no crime. He believed that he had performed what is a legal citizen's arrest, which you are allowed to do. You're allowed to restrain people from committing crimes. And he pointed out that so long as you immediately call the police. But he did that. As soon as he restrained them, he called the cops and waited for them to arrive. But yeah, this Mr. Radalik, he said, well, look, what about all the property damage that's been caused? Who's going to pay for it? And I love this line here. He said, are they going to take away their Centrelink to pay for it? Well, I can tell you, no.
Oh, boy.
A rhetorical question you're asking, of course. But no way. So I really hope this guy gets off. I really hope he does. Because surely you should have the right to restrain people who are damaging your property, particularly if they have been doing it again and again and again.
It's a basic foundation of like the civil order or being civil. The idea is that there's some civility. Being a civilian is literally like descendant thereof. If you're not going to be civil, if there's no civil order, then you're not going to be civil with whatever fucking perpetrator goes against you. He was lenient in this instance.
Okay, so some other crime news. Well, guess what? The Country Liberal Party, who recently were elected in the Northern Territory, they are sticking to an election commitment in terms of their tough on crime approach, and they are reintroducing the spit hood. So, of course, this is like a perforated hood that you put over someone's face when they're spitting at you and sometimes even biting you. And yes, this is something to be known to occur in both adult and juvenile prisons. The Labor government banned this when the photo leaked to the media of Dylan Voller with the spit hood over his head tied to his chair. There was a reason for that. Again, talk about a photo just taken completely out of context. So, Labor caved in to the do-gooder pressure. They abolished it. Northern Territory are bringing it back. And we've got all the usual suspects who are very upset about that. For example, Amnesty International, the so-called human rights campaigners. Just simply retort, what about the human rights of the officers who are being spat at? And in some cases, you're talking about these kids who carry a lot of diseases that, yes, can be spread through saliva. Under Labor, you were basically not allowed to take any action to stop that from occurring. So, good, and I hope they go much, much further with this. Now, still in the Northern Territory, we mentioned that the federal government has a national $4.7 billion package to fight domestic violence. Now, advocates in the Northern Territory don't like this because the funding is based on population and not on needs. Now, I guess they've got a point here because in the Northern Territory, they've only got a little over 200,000 people in the whole territory, yet they have by far the highest per capita rates of domestic violence in the country. But simply based on their low population, they would not attract much of this funding. I would just say, I don't see what this funding is really going to do anyway. You obviously have those high rates of domestic violence because you have the highest per capita population of Aborigines in the country. And you need to get to the root cause of all of that. You're talking about them being unemployed, not sending kids to school, drinking alcohol and getting high off petrol and other stuff all day long. And you've got a lack of police in their areas. So obviously you're going to get a hell of a lot of domestic violence occurring in circumstances like that. I don't know what that extra money is going to do, because that extra money is not about putting more cops on the beat or making the job more attractive to police or other essential workers like nurses who are needed in these remote Aboriginal areas. If you get all that stuff under control, you might actually get a dent in it, in lowering the rate. But if you're talking about simple things like mediation services, like talking it through or something, it's not going to do a bloody thing.
I'd just like to remind the rest of the world that we are basically a economic zone with a daycare attached to it.
Right. Okay, so here in WA, well, we have Banksia Hill Detention Centre, the Youth Detention Centre. The Corrective Services Minister, Paul Papalia, he recently said that the Commissioner for Children and Young People gave the facility, that is Banksia Hill, a glowing report. Now, Jacqueline McGowan Jones, that is the Commissioner for Children and Young People, has actually said that she is devastated by the minister saying this. The reason why is because, well, they say her this quote was taken right out of context. Now, this was actually her words, though, and she was talking about how when she visited Banksia Hill, she saw a lot of the detainees involved in activities like playing sport and stuff. And she basically said that really good things, really good programs were being implemented at Banksia Hill, if you go and read what she said. But of course now, no one wants to be associated with such comments now that we have, 2 deaths occurring in juvenile justice in WA. 2 recent deaths. Before that, we had none at all. Not a single juvenile death in the history of WA. So that leaves this woman to come out and say she's devastated, even though this is what she said. She actually said that if you go there and you have a look at what's being done, how the custodial officers are working, the programs that are put in place for them, the activities that the kids get up to, they're pretty much doing their best. The reason why you have things like overdoses is because you have a facility that is full of the worst juveniles in the state. So obviously,
absolute fucking ferals.
Yeah. And the population, by the way, is like only 150. So you're talking about like 150 of the worst juvenile criminals.
The most distilled criminals. Like literally the worst of the youth, the worst of everything.
Yeah.
Mm.
Okay.
Oh, well.
Now, in Mount Isa, which is in Queensland, there is a big push here from local council leaders, but also many in the community, for a prison to be built there. Now, usually, it's the complete opposite. Like residents are up in arms if a prison facility is going to be built near where they live. In Mount Isa, it seems it's not the case at all. Now, the reason for that is because there have been a lot of recent job losses there. Why is that? Because the main employment driver was mining. And with that sector under attack all the time, you've had a hell of a lot of people, blue-collar people, lose their jobs. The other thing about Mount Isa is that it has one of the highest crime rates in the country. Even when you compare it to other regional areas in Queensland, it has an enormously high crime rate. Now, I got to point this out. I just quickly Googled this. You want to know what the Aboriginal population is of Mount Isa? 20%.
I was gonna say on 20.
Yeah, it is 20%.
It's Mount fucking Isa, so it means there's people who take care of the roads, council rights, and etc. because it's still functional. But there has to be some fucking unga bungas in there, doesn't there?
So the people living there are like, fine, do it. Build a prison. Make it right next door to me. If that simply means we can lock more of them up in there. You never read a story like this. You never read a story where citizens are saying, build a prison here, do it. It's always the opposite.
Welcome to hell. Welcome to hell.
Okay, now the LNP in Queensland is said that they're going to introduce a sex offender registry if they're elected in October. Good. They said that this law, as it's proposed anyway, would be named after Daniel Morecombe. Not sure if I'm saying that right. But this was a guy who was murdered by a previously convicted pedophile in 2003. So, of course, the argument goes that if this guy's name was on a publicly accessible register, people would know about him. Yeah, look, I'm all for that. Why would anyone have an issue with naming and shaming pedophiles? I think that is absolutely something that the public has a right to know about. So, yeah, if this is actually the Libs getting tough on crime and they mean it, then good. All right. So I had not heard of these before, but New South Wales are about to roll out a trial of what are called point-to-point speed cameras.
Deltas, Novas.
So you heard of these. This is where it tracks you driving from one point to another and calculates.
Have you driven down to Busselton at any point?
Have I driven to Busselton?
Yes.
Yeah, I have.
Okay, you've gone through a fucking Delta or a Nova speed camera.
Okay, and that's what these are, point-to-point cameras.
Yes.
So I don't get, like, why would that be, say, a more efficient way of gauging people's speed than just a normal speed camera?
It's not instant. It's more reliable, but also, quote unquote, like dude, like you can get point A to point B. Guess where the fucking truck stop is on the way down to Boston? Between point A and point B.
Don't know.
No, it's between point A and point B. You can speed all you want. Go into for a truck stop, get like a sausage roll, and then speed all the way down to it.
Oh, you're just saying so long as you keep the average like at a certain...
Yep. Yes.
Oh, right. I get you.
Yeah, it's a Nova. It's a Delta.
Okay, well, look, I don't know how... You're obviously talking about a very large distance there, but I don't know what they're talking about with New South Wales. Like, what?
It's a stretch of road. Like, you can speed all you want, know the average speed for that road preeminently, and then, like, pull over and then just wait.
Well, that doesn't sound very efficient then, like, particularly if people are aware of that. You know, they're like, oh, I can speed for a while. Like, the camera's not going to get me for that. Anyway, the trial is going to last for 6 months. And yeah, then I guess they'll make a decision as to whether or not this will be a permanent thing. Okay, now our last story on crime. This is on doxing. So doxing will be outlawed, and victims of, quote, serious invasions of privacy will be able to seek compensation through the courts. So this is, we now have the draft legislation from our Attorney General, Mark Dreyfus. Now, remember, these laws, we're pretty much only getting them, and, you know, this draft legislation was produced pretty damn quickly in the wake of the 600 Jewish creatives, as they're called, who were doxed from a WhatsApp group. So this was these 600 creatives. What they basically did was they organized like letter writing campaigns. So when they saw something that they deemed to be anti-Israel or anti-Semitic or anti-Zionist or whatever, they would basically say, okay, guys, all of us need to write like an email to this company or to this artist. And at the same time, we've got to write an email to whoever their local MP is. And we've got to get them. We've got to boycott them. We've got to do whatever we can to shut them down. Like a good example would be that the guy who dedicated that piano piece to journalists killed in Gaza that we covered recently. He was from the Melbourne Symphony Orchestra. Melbourne Symphony Orchestra. So I don't know if this is the case, but you just know that it would have been Jews from behind the scenes who put all of this pressure on the MSO to scrap that performance, which did actually happen in the short term. So that's what this group of creatives was doing. Now, many of these people in the group were already doxed, like they were already public figures. Their names, their faces, their personal details were already out there. They were simply exposed to be members of this group. They were furious about that when that happened. And might I add that this happened only a few months after you had the Australia Day protests, where you had members of the NSN and the EAM doing, various Australia Day rallies. And, most of them were masked up. They were hiding their identities. And Chris Minns said, well, we are going to do everything we can to dox you, to publicly identify you so that the public knows you're a massive racist. And he did use that term, massive racist. Well, only a few months later, a bunch of Jews get doxed, and then we need anti-doxing laws. So that's what we're going to get. So these laws are proposing you would get a maximum 6 years of imprisonment for the malicious use of personal data. You would also get, there's a more serious penalty though, you'd get 7 years maximum jail where a person or group is being targeted by doxing because of their race, religion, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, intersex status, disability, nationality, or national or ethnic origin. Now, do you notice the one category that is missing there? Political. What if you actually dox someone based on their political beliefs? For example, a white nationalist. Why has that been left out? Now, this is exactly what we said was going to happen, okay? We said that they were going to fine-tune these doxing laws so that, you'd have the book fucking thrown full pelt at you if you went after so-called Jewish creatives. But if you're slack bastard and you dox a local white nationalist, and he's put out of work the next day as a result of that, nothing will happen to you. This is exactly the way I thought it was going to go down. No surprise. Okay, moving to state politics. So, the current South Australian Liberal leader, man, why do I keep forgetting this guy's first name? Vincent Tarzia. He's a really weird, goblin-looking guy, I've got to say. Anyway, he took over from David Spears, and he's saying that it should be seriously considered that the South Australian branch of the Liberal Party go through a federal takeover, just like New South Wales is right now, to sort out the issues there. Now, in New South Wales, this was brought on because of the bungle over getting the paperwork in for the council elections. That meant over 140 Liberals would actually not be running in those elections. But in South Australia, why on earth would they want a federal intervention here? Well, according to Vincent Tarzia, this is because of populist ideology around right-wing issues, where there has been a surge. So South Australia, remember, is like the home, the headquarters of small L Liberals. In fact, this is where the Democrats came from, the Australian Democrats. They were basically, well, you can think of them a lot like the Teals. They were small L Liberals who thought that the current incarnation of the Liberal Party was too conservative, and they broke away and they formed the Australian Democrats. That started in South Australia. Now, conversely, you then have a reaction to that. You've got reactionary figures like Cory Bernardi, who started Australian Conservatives, now defunct. And I guess a better example nowadays would be Alex Antic, who has a podcast called Based. So anyway, it's people like that. It's people like Alex Antic that Vincent Tarzia is really, really worried about. And unfortunately, the man who we turfed out, David Spears, he's saying the same thing. He said he canvassed the idea of placing the South Australian branch into federal administration not long before he stepped down as Liberal leader. Now, David Spears was a guy, or is a guy, who was not factionally aligned. However, he attended like an anti-abortion rally, and this caused a lot of people to criticize him as, some far right winger. Well, no, because he basically supports this federal intervention as well. So, look, this would likely not happen considering that, a so-called far right winger is leading the federal Libs at the moment, that being Peter Dutton. But, just in case you wanted any other reason to think that the South Australian Liberals are in a bad position, well, you've got one. Okay, if you've noticed that you can't hear Nolsey's voice the past few minutes, he just messaged me and said he's feeling sick. I asked him if he could finish the show, and I got no reply, so I assume he's, shitting in liters as we speak. So I will simply continue this myself. So we're still on state and territory politics here. So going over to the Northern Territory, the new Chief Minister, Leah Finocchiaro, has announced the ministry. So, look, I'm not going to bore you with all the names. You can do a simple Google search if you're interested in who's in cabinet there. But what is interesting about this, the new ministry does not include major portfolios such as climate change and remote housing. So they will no longer have a minister for suicide prevention, treaty, local decision-making, parks and ranges, or for women or remote housing and homelands. We've also scrapped the climate change portfolio altogether, and environment will sit with lands and planning under Minister Joshua Burgoyne. So that minister will also oversee the water resources portfolio, which was formerly called water security. Wow. Oh, man. I mean, I'd love to see a Liberal government, like, say, in New South Wales, do something like this. There would be absolute uproar over it. But you know what? I reckon it would be popular. So I'm glad that, over in the Territory, they've got enough sense. Okay, in Queensland. So I mentioned before that the LNP wanted to establish a sex offender registry. Great. I think that would be a really good idea. They also want to have an independent systems inquiry into one of the nation's worst pedophiles. So this guy, Ashley Paul Griffith, last week he pleaded guilty to more than 300 charges against 60 children between 2003 and 2022. And these crimes were committed at early learning centres in Brisbane. Jesus. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, this is obviously a high-profile case considering, just how bad this was. I don't know if they need an individual inquiry, but certainly getting tougher on them, having registries, having the public informed about who these people are. I'm definitely in favour of that. Okay, now the federal Greens. John Howard, former Prime Minister, second longest serving, he is publicly demanding, this is how the Australian words it, both the Coalition and Labor to put the Greens last on their how to vote cards. Now, it has actually been tradition ever since the Howard government, ever since the 1998 election. It has been the tradition for both the Coalition and Labor to put One Nation last on how to vote cards. And that has run pretty consistently at the federal, state, and territory election, like all the way up until recent years. So Howard wants to put that to an end and have the Greens take that spot. So he called them extremists. He said both the major parties should put the Greens last because they're extremists. They have got extreme views on foreign policy, extreme positions on economic policy, extreme positions on social policy. Who knows what some of their social views are? They're so extreme. Yeah, well, others agree with that as well. And that's why, like, the Australian and also Advanced Australia, or Advanced, actually, I think they're just called now. They're like the conservative version of Get Up. They're looking to shine a bit of a spotlight on some of those more radical views that are often overlooked, like free sex changes funded through Medicare. Now, I can't really signal against Howard that much here, I guess, because I think, for a long time anyway, I put the Greens last. And yeah, it's mainly because of those social policies. The problem now is that, we know that Howard, the reason why he's doing this is because he thinks they're anti-Semitic or that they're fueling it. Or at the very least, they're too anti-Israel regarding the current conflict that's going on in Gaza, So even though Howard, may have talked about these extreme social views previously, it's only been recently that he's come out and said, all right, well, you need to put them last. Don't put One Nation last, put the Greens last. Why is that? Because all these Jews are demanding it. Okay, so it has now been confirmed that the seat of North Sydney, which is, traditionally blue ribbon, safe, Liberal seat. I believe this was Joe Hockey's seat, if I'm remembering correctly. It's going to be abolished. So this is entirely the decision of the Electoral Commission. They have an independent process based on population and geography. I'm not going to pretend I know the detail of that. But the point I'm making is that this is not some kind of a partisan decision. It's simply, to do with crunching numbers. Nonetheless, the Liberals are quite devastated by that. Even though there are signs that this seat, is kind of drifting in a teal direction, nonetheless, it is going to make it harder for them. So that is, one disadvantage going into the next election. All right. Back to more general issues here. Social media. So we've got, there's actually quite a few stories here today. So in South Australia, social media giants will be forced to ban children under the age of 14 from their platforms, Facebook, Twitter, etc. If they don't, they would face hefty penalties. So the South Australian government has released a 276-page report by former High Court Justice Robert French. This is on how companies providing social media services like Facebook would need to take systemic responsibility for restricting children from using their products. So, of course, doing things like ID checks and that were just unheard of when platforms like Facebook started. Okay, good. Malinowskis has said that this is fueled by concerns over young people being harmed through social media, their mental health being affected, higher suicide rates, etc. And I can't believe I'm saying this, but I'm actually glad to be seeing the bipartisan nature of this, meaning that both sides of politics are acknowledging that social media can actually be very, very harmful, particularly to young people. Now, talking about this at the federal level, so Albo is promising that there will be legislation introduced to impose a minimum age to use those social media platforms. They said that legislation will be introduced before the end of the year. Peter Dutton has also said that he supports age restrictions on access. So in that respect, there's bipartisan support. Whether or not they will agree with every detail in the legislation, obviously we'll have to wait and see there. And then there's other questions about, well, would there be exemptions for, say, educational and communication apps? So, other areas where students connect online that I guess you could still classify as social media, but they're doing it to, exchange study tips or whatever. So, okay, fine. Obviously, they need to flesh out the detail and get exemptions like that going. That's fine, but surely we can come up with something here. Now, Facebook has admitted that they have been scraping the public photos, posts, and other data of Australian adult users. And this is to train its artificial intelligence models. And further, this does not provide an opt-out option. So, you're not even told about it. So people in the European Union, they can refuse to consent to this. As it stands right now in Australia, you can't. You can't opt out. So rare credit here to the Senator David Shoebridge from the Greens. They were questioning someone from Meta, the owner of Facebook. And you said, the truth of the matter is that unless you have consciously set those posts to private since 2007, that's the date in which they have been scraping that data. Meta has just decided that you will scrape all of the photos and all of the text from every public post on Instagram or Facebook since 2007, unless there was a conscious decision to set them on private. That's the reality, isn't it? And then the representative from Meta said, correct. So there you go. They admit that that's happening. So while the government might want to further regulate social media in regards to young people, they might also want to look at the violations of privacy for the other users. Okay, now the conservative group Advance, who I just mentioned before, they're under scrutiny for their antics on Facebook. So what they've been doing here is they have, I mentioned this earlier, that they've been trying to shine a light on some of the more radical policies of the Greens, and also some of the news that has been reported on them, such as sexual misconduct, but never really got that much attention. So what Advanced Australia have been doing is they have been taking old articles to point it out that they're as old as 2017. Okay, that's 7 years. That's not really that old. But anyway, they've been accused of taking those articles and dressing them up to make it look like they're new. So they've also been paying Facebook or paying Meta to feature those dressed up news articles on the news feed. So what they're, I guess, accused of doing is they're making it look like all of these scandalous stories that have come out about Greens politicians, Green staffers, etc. And there's a lot, by the way, if you want to Google this stuff. Have a look at the amount of like sexual assault, sexual misconduct, allegations, and sometimes just outright proven acts that have occurred here. They're being accused of basically taking all of them and making it look like they've just occurred. And that creates the impression, that if they've just occurred, there must be a lot of them, all happening at various times. I don't know about that. I mean, all you've got to do is simply click the news story and you read the date that is right at the top of the page. However, Queensland University of Technology digital communications expert, as he's referred to, Professor Daniel Angus, has said that this is what you would call a malinformation campaign, where true information is removed from its appropriate context and then spread with the intent to harm reputations. So he pointed out that a lot of people who are scrolling through those news feeds on Facebook don't then click to read the full article, but simply read the headline and move on, and therefore, come to the conclusion that, it's only just happened, that it's a recent story. So people get the impression, oh shit, the Greens are like doing all of this scandalous stuff all at the same time. Well, complaints have already been made to Facebook about this. And would you believe that at the moment, Facebook is saying, well, no, there's no policy, there's no regulation that says they can't do that. There's nothing that says you can't post old news articles. I mean, that's effectively what they're saying. They're dressing it up in all this fancy language, saying it's malinformation. All they're doing is saying, hey, there are these earlier reports of stuff that the Greens have done, and it's actually really, really bad. And a lot of people aren't aware of it. Have a look. And it's true. I mean, how often is that stuff actually reported? It's very rare. Okay, now, we remember the misinformation laws that have been touted for a long time. Now, the government did sort of go back to the drawing board with this because there was a lot of public outcry that these laws would stifle freedom of speech, which, of course, they would. I don't see what's controversial about that. But anyway, they're going to release revised draft legislation that is designed to fight online misinformation. So this is to be introduced on Thursday. Well, that's today as of now, so it already would have been introduced. It said it will include updated definitions of misinformation and disinformation and provisions to ensure content produced by governments is captured by the legislation. Right, so this was one of the controversial points of the original proposition, and that is that the government would be incapable of producing misinformation, right? So, it wouldn't matter what kind of ads or whatever they put out, the government would be exempt from these laws. So now they're saying, okay, well, I guess if we want to be consistent, we want to be fair, well, we've got to include ourselves in this. We can't make ourselves immune. So this would grant the Australian Communications and Media Authority more powers to fine social media giants for hosting false information and content that is deemed harmful. But it'll also include new exemptions for religious content. So another controversial point about the original proposed legislation. What if a church puts out something about evolution not being true? Well, I think that's a ridiculous point of view, but I think you should be fully entitled to express it, even if it is demonstrably false. I don't want the idea of outlawing misinformation to spread into that world where, you can't make a case for creationism or whatever. If you want to make that case, even if it's bullshit, I still think, you should have a right to do that. So that's good. What I'm still worried about here is that they're going to use this stuff against white nationalists. And how do we know that? Albanese said he would. When the Liberals first questioned this in Parliament, Albanese pointed out that white nationalists were tying Jewish figures like Mark Liebler to the Aboriginal post of Parliament, which of course was absolutely true. But they wanted to deem that to be a form of misinformation for which you could be fined for. Now, there is nothing here that I've read about this revised proposed legislation that said, white nationalists would be exempt, that, tying Jews to particular social and political movements would be exempt. That, of course, is not happening. And what is worse about that is that this then would be legislation that the coalition would be much more likely to support and therefore push through the parliament. Okay, now on artificial intelligence, the Teal Senator David Pocock, he shared 2 AI-generated videos recently. So it was one of Anthony Albanese, what was it? Oh yeah, supporting a ban on gambling advertising, and then another one of Peter Dutton supporting the government's ban on gambling advertising. Now, these videos were fake. They were AI generated. I didn't think they were entirely convincing, though, because if you listen to them, you can kind of hear a bit of the robot voice come through. Nonetheless, I can definitely see how at least some people would be fooled by them. So David Pocock produced these as making a point that, well, maybe we need regulation on AI, particularly, like AI-generated images like deepfakes and, that kind of thing. So, yeah, he's got a point. And by the way, this just reminded me, I forgot to put this in the prep. I was supposed to mention this when discussing the South Australian Liberals. The former leader, David Spears, a video has gotten out of him snorting a white powder. Now, some people are saying that this is a deep fake, meaning an AI-generated video. Other people are saying that it is real. I have no idea. I saw like a very quick snippet of the video. I don't know. I'd have to go and examine it a bit closer. But David Spears has just gone on leave. He was taking personal leave, and he was basically saying that he's, really stressed out. Now, that might have something to do with also, being rolled as leader recently. But it may also suggest that, well, maybe this video is real. If it is fake, well, that just further makes David Pocock's point. Maybe we do need some regulation and say, you can't just create a deep fake video that makes someone look like they have just engaged in dangerous activity. That would be, of course, defamatory. All right, moving on to education. The ABC profiled a former WA school teacher, saying that she left the profession due to burnout. She said it wasn't because of pay. She just said that the stress of being a teacher, all the work involved, and the attitude of students was causing burnout. Now, look, it is true that we've got a teacher shortage. So the federal government has made a prediction that by next year, demand for high school students will exceed the supply by more than 4,000. So, yeah, we're getting up there. And that, of course, means, more substitute teachers and larger class sizes, or some classes just don't get teachers at all. So, like things like elective subjects, if they can't get a teacher to teach it, well, they'll just scrap that entire subject. Now, I think part of this is the fact that students are becoming more unruly. Increasingly, you get reports where, it sounds like these American schools that we hear about, where teachers are being assaulted. Now, teachers being assaulted in Australia used to be something that we just never heard of. It just didn't happen. Now we see it all the time. And it's not just because people have cameras, okay? All right, that might contribute a bit to the visibility of it. But it's just getting reported more and more. And a lot of teachers are quitting. It may not be because they're being assaulted, but at the very least, the class is becoming out of control, unruly. You've got students misbehaving all the time, and the teacher really struggles to keep it under control. That, of course, is extremely stressful. Where you're there sort of like almost acting like a police officer when you're supposed to be teaching. And why is that? Well, one definite thing is these Aboriginal schools that we insist on staffing and insist on getting Aboriginal kids to school. And they don't go there to learn, they go there to cause a shitload of trouble. And when you have the abolition of the cashless welfare card, the abolition of drive zones, less police in these communities, well, you're going to see more of that, aren't you? But also, of course, it's just we're importing too many non-whites. I mean, how well behaved do you think the children of so-called Sudanese refugees are going to behave? They're much more likely to be stabbing people than behaving in a classroom. So, yeah. That, I think, is the main thing. I doubt it would be... it can't be burnout because of hours. A school day is 6.5 hours, and you get 13 weeks holiday a year. It can't be that. And that's one thing, that makes me think about teachers, stop complaining. How can you complain when you have that much annual leave? But no, I do understand that when you're in the classroom and you're dealing with unruly students, that's a bitch. And yeah, we need to do something about that. Not that we're going to. Okay, now in Queensland, they're getting so desperate that student teachers would be paid $5,000 for their final placement in Queensland, including students who are currently in schools or starting their placement this semester. So this is a $71 million program that Queensland Labor have just announced. And it is particularly looking to employ graduates in North Central and Far North Queensland. So those who complete their placement in the regions will get a further $5,000. And new teachers who choose to work in those regions are now entitled to a further $20,000 over their first 4 years in the job. They will receive $4,000 at the end of the first year, $5,000 in the second and third years, and $6,000 in the last year of the scheme. So how about that? Just outright bribery for teachers to take on these jobs. Okay. So moving on to gambling in New South Wales, the cashless gaming trial. This was a voluntary scheme where you would kind of sign up, you'd have your info, you'd have an app on your phone, and once you exceeded a certain amount of money spent on the pokies or whatever, you would be locked out of the system. Well, it's turned out that so far only 207 people have signed up to this app-based trial. But further to that, only 32 of them are active users. In other words, only 32 people are actually on this scheme right now. So it is piss weak. The government is saying, well, look, people just don't trust these apps because of privacy. And I guess he's got a point there. When people, use an app scan in somewhere that has all your personal details on it, well, yeah, people obviously do have privacy concerns there. Which means, well, maybe you need something else here. Maybe everyone who enters needs to be issued a card, like a physical card, that will lock them out after a certain amount of time. Rather than having an opt-in system, just make it compulsory. Now, back in Queensland, Star Entertainment Group, their $3.6 billion Queen's Wharf precinct in Brisbane, is under some severe financial issues. So the Premier, Stephen Miles, has confirmed that Star sought financial help from the government, such as payroll and gambling tax deferrals from the Queensland government. Now, despite all of this, they have received a new casino license for the Queen's Wharf development. So, yeah, I mean, look, considering all the tax money and everything that they still reap in from this casino, we know how much all these casinos pull in. It's not surprising that they've done that, even though it appears like they're in some financial trouble themselves. The government is still taking in the money, so, they're willing to do some favours for the time being. Okay, final story for you, so you don't have to just listen to me for much longer. The National Anti-Corruption Commission, so, think of ICAC in New South Wales, but at the federal level, this recently came into operation, and it's been confirmed that there are 6 investigations underway that are looking at the behaviour of current and former politicians, and another 3 investigations concerning the behaviour of past or present parliamentary staff. So there are a total of 29 corruption probes on foot. 26 of those started in the 23 to 24 reporting period. It is unclear which current or former politicians and even staffers they're investigating. Now, we do have an idea, though. So, former Liberal Minister Stuart Robert, he was a close ally of Scott Morrison, was referred to the Commission late last year by a Labor-led parliamentary committee, and this was over his links to the consulting firm Synergy 360. But also, we know that Linda Reynolds said that she was going to refer Mark Dreyfus to this commission because of the almost $2.5 million payout that was given from the Commonwealth to Brittany Higgins. And that was for her time working under not just Linda Reynolds, but also Michaelia Cash. Now, it's also been revealed by news.com.au that in August, the home of former Liberal staffer Bruce Lehrmann, of course the man accused of raping Brittany Higgins, was raided by the Commission in June over potential document leaks to do with the failed French submarine deal. So maybe you want to put on your conspiracy hats now. I bet you were thinking, this must have had something to do with the alleged rape. No, this is to do when Linda Reynolds was Defence Minister, and you had the botched deal where originally we had an agreement that France was going to manufacture diesel-powered submarines for Australia, and then of course we went with AUKUS in the end. We said no, we're actually going to go for nuclear-powered submarines, and we are supposedly going to build them ourselves in Adelaide. That won't ever happen. If we do get them, we're going to get them from America. But anyway, that's actually what that was about. The French government was extremely annoyed after that, and they had every reason to be, because they had actually already started the manufacturing of those submarines. So they were, financially at least, were really screwed over by it. So yeah, it doesn't surprise me that the commission would want to get their hands on documents that would give details about all of that. Okay, well, that's all we have for you today. Sorry you had to just deal with me for the end of all of that. But yeah, thank you for listening to episode 230 of The Racist War and Everything. Remember to check us out at theracer.biz if you want to get the links to all our accounts and so forth. And yeah, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week.